You ever wake up in the middle of the night with this gnawing feeling that you're supposed to be doing something more, something bigger, but you can't quite put your finger on what it is? That restlessness that sits in your chest like a stone, making you scroll through your phone at 3 a.m. looking for answers you know you won't find there. You look around at your life, at the routine you've built, the responsibilities you carry, the roles you play, and somewhere deep inside there's this quiet voice asking if this is really all there is. That voice doesn't scream. It doesn't demand. It just sits there, persistent and patient, reminding you that something essential is missing. You feel it when you're alone. You feel it in crowds. You feel it most acutely when you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, checking all the boxes society laid out for you, yet somehow feeling more lost than ever. This isn't just restlessness. This isn't dissatisfaction with your job or your relationship or your city. This is something deeper, something that touches the very core of who you are and why you're here. You've probably tried to silence it. You've worked harder, bought things, traveled, sought validation, thrown yourself into hobbies or relationships or causes, hoping that the next achievement or experience would finally fill that void. But it doesn't work, does it? The feeling returns. Always. Because what you're experiencing isn't a problem to be solved with external changes. What you're experiencing is your soul recognizing that it came here with a mission, and you're not living it. You're surviving, maybe even succeeding by conventional measures, but you're not thriving in the way your deepest self knows is possible. The exhaustion you feel isn't from working too hard. It's from working on the wrong things. The loneliness you feel isn't from being alone. It's from being disconnected from your purpose. And the frustration that builds and builds until you want to scream is your entire being trying to tell you that you were meant for something specific, something that only you can do, and every day you ignore it is a day you betray the most authentic part of yourself. Abraham Maslow spent his entire career studying this phenomenon. But his most profound discovery wasn't about the hierarchy of needs that made him famous. It wasn't about self-actualization as some abstract concept reserved for the enlightened few. His most radical finding was this: there are certain people who come into this world already wired with a specific mission, a unique contribution that is theirs and theirs alone to make. He called them many things throughout his research, studying them with the intensity of someone who recognized he was witnessing something sacred. These weren't just high achievers. These weren't people who happened to find success. These were individuals whose very existence seemed purpose-driven, whose lives unfolded as if guided by an internal compass pointing toward a destiny they couldn't ignore, even if they tried. Maslow discovered that these mission-driven souls could be categorized into 5 distinct types, each with their own characteristics, challenges, and paths to fulfillment. Understanding which type you are isn't just intellectually interesting. It's the difference between spending your life wondering why you feel so out of place and finally coming home to yourself. Today I'm going to show you exactly what Maslow discovered about these 5 types of souls, how to identify which one you are, and most importantly, what you need to do to finally align your daily life with the mission you were born to fulfill. Because here's the truth. Maslow understood that most people miss. Your sense of purpose isn't something you need to create or discover through endless soul-searching. It's already there, woven into the fabric of who you are, waiting for you to stop ignoring it and start honoring it. The question isn't whether you have a mission. The question is whether you're brave enough to live it. Maslow's research into mission-driven individuals began in an unexpected place. In the late 1950s, he was studying a group of college students at Brandeis University, conducting his usual personality assessments and motivation interviews. Most students gave him exactly what he expected, talking about career goals, relationships, security, the standard progression up his hierarchy of needs. But there was one young woman, he never used her real name in his notes but called her Subject M, who stopped him cold. When he asked about her goals, she didn't talk about getting married or finding a good job. She talked about this unshakable feeling that she was meant to help children who couldn't speak for themselves. She was only 19, came from a comfortable middle-class family with no particular trauma or obvious catalyst for this conviction. Yet she described her purpose with such clarity and certainty that Maslow found himself completely absorbed. She told him it wasn't something she chose. It wasn't something she particularly wanted given how difficult she knew the path would be. It was simply what she knew to be true about herself, as fundamental as knowing she had brown eyes or could speak English. What struck Maslow most was that this young woman was already operating at a level of self-actualization that most people wouldn't reach until their 40s or 50s, if ever. She hadn't satisfied all the lower needs in his hierarchy. She wasn't financially secure. She didn't have a stable romantic relationship. Yet she was already deeply engaged with questions of meaning and purpose that supposedly came only after everything else was handled. This violation of his own theory disturbed him enough that he began actively seeking out similar cases. Over the next decade, he would interview hundreds of individuals who displayed this same pattern, people who seemed to bypass the normal developmental sequence because they carried within them a mission that wouldn't wait for convenience. The first type of soul Maslow identified he called the wounded healer. These are individuals who experienced significant suffering early in life, not random suffering but specific pain that became the foundation of their mission. Subject M, it turned out, had a younger brother with severe autism at a time when autism wasn't understood or accommodated. She watched her parents struggle, watched her brother suffer, felt her own helplessness as a child, unable to make things better. That experience didn't just hurt her, it initiated her. It gave her first-hand knowledge of a problem that needed solving, and an emotional investment that would sustain her through decades of difficult work. Maslow found this pattern repeatedly. A woman who nearly died from an eating disorder in her teens became a leading voice in body positivity and eating disorder recovery. A man who grew up in grinding poverty with an alcoholic father built innovative social programs that broke cycles of addiction and economic despair. Their wounds weren't obstacles to overcome before they could fulfill their purpose. Their wounds were the very source of their purpose, giving them both the knowledge and the motivation that no amount of academic study could replicate. The second type Maslow called the natural empath. These individuals came into the world with an almost supernatural ability to feel what others feel, to sense emotional undercurrents that most people miss entirely. One of his most fascinating subjects was a young man who described walking into rooms and immediately knowing the emotional temperature, who could look at someone's face and see not just their expression but the story behind it. This wasn't learned. He remembered having this ability as a young child, being disturbed by it actually, feeling overwhelmed by all the pain and complexity he perceived in the adults around him. As he grew older and Maslow tracked his development, this young man struggled immensely with boundaries, with the weight of carrying everyone else's emotions. But once he found his mission, once he trained as a therapist and later developed group therapy techniques that revolutionized how people connected with each other, his extreme empathy shifted from being a burden to being his greatest gift. Natural empaths often spend their early years feeling like they don't fit, like they're too sensitive, too affected by things that don't seem to bother other people. What they don't realize until they find their mission is that their sensitivity is actually a form of perception, a way of gathering information that allows them to serve and heal in ways others simply cannot. Look, I need to pause here and ask you something real. As you're hearing about these types, about these people who came here with a mission, what are you feeling right now? Is there a part of you that's getting that tightness in your chest? That recognition that you've spent so long thinking something was wrong with you when maybe, just maybe, you were actually wired for something specific? Have you spent years trying to fit into molds that were never made for you, wondering why success as others define it feels so hollow? If this is resonating, if you're sitting there feeling seen for the first time in a long time, leave a comment right now. Just write, "I feel like I've been living someone else's life." That's it. Just that simple sentence. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to read today to feel less alone. You have more power to heal through simple honesty than you imagine. Letting someone else know they're not crazy for feeling this way, that's part of your mission right there. So go ahead, drop that comment. I'll be reading them, and I promise you, your words matter more than you know. The third type of mission-driven soul Maslow identified was the truth teller. These are individuals who seem constitutionally incapable of accepting convenient lies or comfortable illusions. They see through social facades, through institutional hypocrisy, through the gaps between what people say and what they do. and they feel compelled to point it out even when doing so costs them relationships, opportunities, security. Maslow studied a journalist in the early 1960s who kept getting fired from newspapers because she refused to soften stories that made advertisers or powerful people uncomfortable. She wasn't trying to be difficult. She genuinely could not bring herself to participate in what she saw as collective dishonesty. She would rather be poor and tell the truth than comfortable and complicit. This pattern appeared across different fields. A scientist who challenged fraudulent research even though it destroyed his career. A minister who spoke against corruption in his own church and was expelled from his denomination. A teacher who exposed educational inequities and was blacklisted. What unified them wasn't rebelliousness for its own sake. It was an almost physical inability to stay silent in the face of what they knew to be false. Maslow noted that truth-tellers pay an enormous price for their mission. They often end up isolated, financially unstable, dismissed as troublemakers. Yet when he asked if they would choose differently if they could, none of them would. The idea of living with the knowledge of truth and choosing to protect lies instead was more unbearable to them than any external consequence. The fourth type Maslow called the creator. These souls came in with an overwhelming need to bring something new into existence, something that didn't exist before and couldn't exist without them. This wasn't about ego or recognition. The creators Maslow studied often worked in obscurity, sometimes for their entire lives, driven by an internal imperative to make, to build, to manifest. He spent considerable time with an artist in California who painted every single day for 40 years, producing thousands of works that almost no one saw. When Maslow asked why she continued despite having no audience, no sales, no validation from the art world, she looked at him as if he'd asked why she continued breathing. The painting wasn't something she did. It was how she existed. She described feeling like a channel, like something wanted to come through her into the world, and her job was simply to show up and allow it. Maslow found this same quality in inventors, writers, musicians, even a woman who created elaborate gardens that she would then destroy and recreate in new forms. Creators are often misunderstood as self-indulgent or impractical, but Maslow realized their compulsion to create was actually a form of service. They were bringing beauty, innovation, new perspectives, new possibilities into existence for everyone else to experience and benefit from. The tragedy he observed was how many potential creators spent their lives in jobs that didn't allow for creative expression, feeling increasingly dead inside, not understanding that their depression wasn't a chemical imbalance, but a soul imbalance, a mission being suffocated. The fifth and final type Maslow termed the bridge builder. These are individuals whose mission is to connect things that seem separate, to find common ground between opposing sides, to translate between different worlds. They don't fit neatly into one category or group. They speak multiple languages, literal or metaphorical. They understand seemingly contradictory perspectives and can hold them simultaneously without needing to choose sides. Maslow studied a community organizer in the South during the Civil Rights Movement who had the remarkable ability to bring together people who hated each other, not through manipulation or false equivalence, but through helping each side genuinely understand the other's humanity. This man grew up between worlds himself, mixed race at a time when that meant belonging nowhere, which gave him both the pain of perpetual outsider status and the unique vantage point of seeing how artificial most divisions actually are. Bridge builders often feel torn, never quite at home anywhere, always translating, always mediating. They can feel exhausted by the constant work of connection. But their mission is crucial. In a world that increasingly fragments into opposing camps, bridge builders are the ones who maintain the possibility of understanding, of cooperation, of evolution beyond false binaries. Now here's where Maslow's research gets really interesting. He didn't just identify these 5 types. He tracked what happened when people of each type tried to live in ways that contradicted their mission versus when they aligned with it. The differences were staggering. Wounded healers who tried to just move on from their wounds without transforming them into service almost universally developed chronic health issues, depression, addiction. Their bodies seemed to hold the pain they weren't transforming into purpose. But wounded healers who leaned into their mission, who used their suffering as a source of wisdom and fuel for helping others, reported profound satisfaction even when their work was difficult and their wounds occasionally reopened. Natural empaths who tried to shut down their sensitivity to fit into normal career paths typically ended up in crisis by their 30s, their empathy exploding out in uncontrolled ways through panic attacks or emotional breakdowns or complete isolation. But natural empaths who found roles that honored their perceptive abilities, whether as counselors or artists or healers or advocates, thrived in ways that baffled people around them. They could handle incredibly heavy emotional content without burning out, because they were finally using their wiring as intended rather than fighting against it. Truth-tellers who sold out, who accepted comfortable positions that required them to stay quiet about things they knew were wrong, uniformly reported feeling like they were dying inside. Maslow noted they used that exact phrase repeatedly, dying inside, as if their integrity was so core to their identity that compromising it was literally killing them. Several developed serious health crises within years of making such compromises. But truth-tellers who found ways to speak their truth, even if it meant living more simply or facing opposition, maintained remarkable vitality and peace even in difficult circumstances. Creators who abandoned their creative impulses for practical concerns became shells of themselves. Maslow observed that they seemed to age faster, lose their spark, become cynical and bitter. The ones who protected time for creation, who insisted on making space for their work even when it seemed impractical, maintained youthfulness and engagement with life regardless of external success. And bridge builders who chose sides, who gave up on connection in favor of belonging to one group, lost the very thing that made them special. They fit in better but felt hollow. Those who maintained their commitment to connection despite the loneliness it sometimes caused reported a sense of rightness, of being where they were supposed to be, even when it was hard. What Maslow concluded from all this longitudinal data was radical for his time and remains challenging now. He proposed that for these mission-driven souls, self-actualization doesn't follow the hierarchy of needs. It precedes it. Their purpose isn't the cherry on top after all other needs are met. Their purpose is the organizing principle that determines everything else. A wounded healer trying to achieve security before addressing their mission will never feel secure. The mission is the path to security, not the other way around. A natural empath trying to establish belonging by fitting in with normal people will never feel they belong. Belonging comes from finding others who need their empathic gifts and joining in that service. A truth-teller seeking approval and validation before speaking truth will wait forever, because truth-telling by nature threatens those in power. The validation comes from the integrity itself, from alignment between inner knowing and outer expression. This inversion of the hierarchy explained why so many high-achieving, successful people came to Maslow in crisis. They had done everything right according to the cultural script. They had security, relationships, status, even respect in their fields, but they felt empty because they were successful at the wrong thing. They had climbed the ladder only to find it was leaning against the wrong wall, and now they faced the terrifying question of whether to stay with what was safe but soul-killing, or to leap toward what was true but uncertain. Maslow found that the ones who leaped, who finally honored their mission even at great cost, rarely regretted it. Even when things got hard, even when they lost income or relationships or status, they reported a quality of aliveness they had never experienced before. It was as if they had been sleeping their whole lives and suddenly woke up. But Maslow also documented the dangers these mission-driven souls faced. Each type had predictable pitfalls. Wounded healers could become addicted to their wounds, defining themselves so completely by their suffering that they unconsciously sabotaged their own healing to maintain their identity and sense of purpose. They could also develop savior complexes, trying to rescue everyone with similar wounds and burning out completely. Natural empaths face the constant danger of losing themselves in others, taking on so much pain that they couldn't function, or developing such poor boundaries that they attracted vampiric relationships that drained them dry. They needed to learn that empathy without boundaries isn't compassion, it's self-destruction. Truth-tellers could become addicted to opposition, so identified with being the outsider or the rebel that they created conflict even when it wasn't necessary, unable to accept when something was actually good or true, because their entire identity was built around exposing what was false. They could also become bitter and misanthropic, so disgusted by human hypocrisy that they lost the very compassion that should fuel truth-telling. Creators faced the danger of becoming so precious about their work, so identified with being an artist or innovator, that they couldn't actually produce anything because nothing felt good enough. They could also disconnect from the reality that creation serves others, becoming solipsistic and self-indulgent, making work that pleased only themselves, and then feeling bitter when the world didn't celebrate it. And bridge builders could exhaust themselves trying to connect everyone, taking on the impossible burden of solving all division. Or they could fall into the trap of false equivalence, treating all perspectives as equally valid even when some were clearly harmful, sacrificing truth for the sake of connection. Each mission came with shadow aspects that had to be navigated consciously, or they would undermine the very purpose they were meant to serve. Maslow developed a process he called mission integration to help these individuals navigate their path. First was the recognition phase. This was simply acknowledging that you are one of these types, that you came here with a specific mission, that your struggles and your sensitivities and your strange compulsions aren't problems to fix but signals to follow. So many of the people he worked with had spent decades in therapy trying to become normal, trying to get rid of the very characteristics that made them capable of their mission. Recognition meant accepting that you're not broken. You're specific. Second was the claiming phase. This meant taking ownership of your mission, no longer waiting for permission or perfect circumstances, no longer making excuses about why you can't start yet. Claiming meant saying yes to what you knew to be true, even when it scared you, even when you didn't know how it would work out. Third was the refining phase. This was learning the specific skills and knowledge your mission required, seeking out mentors and examples, experimenting with different approaches, allowing yourself to be a beginner at the thing you were born to do. Too many mission-driven people gave up because they expected to be instantly good at their purpose, not realizing that even when you're wired for something, you still have to develop competence through practice. Fourth was the protecting phase. This meant establishing boundaries and structures that safeguarded your mission from the constant demands and distractions of normal life. It meant saying no to opportunities that looked good, but pulled you away from your purpose. It meant disappointing people who wanted you to be different than you were. It meant protecting time and energy for what mattered most, even when that seemed selfish or impractical to others. And fifth was the expanding phase. This was moving from personal mission to collective impact, from doing your work in isolation to connecting with others who shared your purpose or needed what you offered. It was understanding that your mission isn't ultimately about you, it's about what moves through you into the world. Most people got stuck between claiming and refining, making a dramatic decision to follow their purpose, and then giving up when it got hard or unclear. Maslow emphasized that mission integration was a lifelong process, not a one-time event. You would move through these phases repeatedly at deeper levels throughout your life. He also noted that each type had specific signs that they were on track versus off track. Wounded healers on track felt energized by their service work, even when it was emotionally heavy. They could engage with suffering without being destroyed by it. They experienced their wounds as sources of wisdom rather than open injuries. Off track, they felt exhausted, resentful, unable to separate their story from their clients' stories, re-traumatizing themselves repeatedly. Natural empaths on track maintained clear boundaries while staying open. They could feel others' emotions without taking them on. They experienced their empathy as a gift that allowed deep connection. Off track, they felt overwhelmed, invaded, unable to tell their feelings from others' feelings, shutting down completely or melting down regularly. Truth-tellers on track spoke truth with compassion, motivated by love of what could be rather than hatred of what was. They chose their battles wisely, knowing when to speak and when to be silent. Off track, they became angry, cynical, compulsively confrontational, unable to see anything good anywhere, isolated and bitter. Creators on track produced work consistently, finding joy in the process regardless of outcome. They experienced flow states regularly, lost in their creation. They offered their work to the world without being attached to how it was received. Off track, they felt blocked, obsessed with recognition, unable to make anything without immediately judging it. or producing compulsively without any real satisfaction. Bridge builders on track created genuine understanding and connection between different groups. They maintained their own center while holding space for multiple perspectives. They could see progress even when complete harmony wasn't possible. Off track, they felt pulled apart, unable to maintain their own viewpoint, exhausted by constant mediation, or they gave up entirely and chose a side, losing their bridging capacity. The most moving part of Maslow's research for me is his documentation of what he called late bloomers. These were individuals who didn't discover or embrace their mission until their 40s, 50s, even 60s. They had spent decades feeling wrong, trying to fit in, building lives that looked successful but felt empty. Then something happened, a crisis or loss or just accumulated frustration, and they finally allowed themselves to acknowledge who they really were and what they were really here to do. Maslow followed several of these late bloomers for years and found that they often accomplished more in a decade aligned with their mission than they had in all the previous decades combined. It wasn't too late. It's never too late. The mission doesn't expire. It just waits, patient and persistent for you to finally say yes. One woman he studied worked as a corporate accountant for 23 years, successful by every external measure but profoundly depressed. At 49, her mother died, and something broke open in her. She realized she had spent her entire adult life trying to make her mother proud by being stable and practical, ignoring the fact that she was a natural empath with a gift for helping people navigate grief. Within 2 years, she had retrained as a grief counselor, left her corporate job, and built a small practice. Her income dropped by more than half. Her friends thought she was having a breakdown. But when Maslow interviewed her 3 years into her new path, she said something he never forgot. She told him that she felt like she had been born at 49, like everything before was just waiting. She finally understood what it meant to be alive. That's what alignment with mission does. It doesn't make life easier. It makes life real. You've been carrying this for so long. This feeling that you're meant for something you can't quite name. This restlessness that won't be soothed by achievements or possessions or distractions. You've probably questioned yourself 1,000 times, wondering if you're just being dramatic or unrealistic or selfish for thinking you should do anything other than what's expected. But here's what Maslow understood that most people miss. That feeling isn't evidence of something wrong with you. It's evidence of something right with you. It's your mission knocking, asking to be let in, asking to be lived. Every person he studied who finally honored that calling reported the same thing. Relief. Not constant happiness, not the absence of struggle, but profound relief at finally being who they actually were instead of who they thought they should be. And you know what? That relief is available to you too. If what I've shared today has touched something in you, if you're sitting there feeling like maybe, just maybe, you're one of these souls who came here with a specific purpose, I want you to know you've found your place. This isn't just another video you'll watch and forget. This is the beginning of you taking your mission seriously, of you surrounding yourself with ideas and reminders that call you back to who you really are. The work we do here, diving deep into Maslow's insights about human potential and purpose, this is food for mission-driven souls. Every week we explore another aspect of what it means to live authentically, to grow toward your full potential, to honor the unique way you're wired to serve. This isn't surface-level motivation. This is the deep work of becoming who you were meant to be. And honestly, I'd love for you to join us on this journey. Just click that subscribe button, take that first small step of saying yes to the part of you that's been waiting for permission to come fully alive. We're building something here, a community of people who refuse to settle for less than their full potential, who are brave enough to live their mission even when it's inconvenient. You belong here. Continue discovering with us. And if you want to go even deeper into understanding your specific wiring, the next video you need to watch is about the 3 signs you're a self-actualizing person according to Maslow, and why that makes normal life feel impossible. Because once you start honoring your mission, everything changes, and you need to understand what that transformation looks like so you don't mistake growth for crisis. I'll see you there. Keep honoring what's true in you. The world needs what only you can offer.